Everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. Lisa Bodell. Lisa, I'm excited to talk to you. Looking forward to diving in, talking about innovation and lots of great things. You're the founder and CEO of Future Think.
Yeah.
You are the best-selling author. Your book, Why Simple Wins: Escape the Complexity Trap and Get to Work That Matters. I want to read a little bit of your bio. Complexity is crippling our organizations. It's stifling our people and keeping them from doing their most meaningful and impactful work. And so one of the things that I love about that is, as a business coach, one of the things I talk about as well is breaking things down to the simple.
Yeah.
Kindergarten to second grade level. And I as well, I see people just spending way too much time making things too complicated.
Yeah.
And so what's your formula for reverse engineering complicated?
So I think there's a couple things. First of all, when you deal with companies, and I deal a lot of groups that are in regulated industries, everything is going to be complex. There's still going to be a lot of complexity, but it doesn't have to be complicated. To your point, there's a difference, right? And yes, there's always going to be some necessary complexity, right? We want people, especially in healthcare, drugs need to be regulated, flights, people need to go to flight school, banks need to have security in place. But what we're talking about here is the unnecessary complexity. And I define that as invisible waste, right? It's work without the benefits. And that's what gives so many people this epidemic of burnout, because they're dealing with the work of work, the unnecessary administrivia that is holding them back from what they were hired to do in the first place, the meaningful work. And companies need to start thinking about a couple things. They seem to mistake being organized with being simplified. And that's not true, right? It doesn't matter how much you organize if you're organizing the wrong stuff. So we need to stop putting all this organization and process in place. But more importantly, we need to build subtraction into our workflow. And what I mean by that is, our default is to add more things because doing more is more valuable. But complexity is like a weed. It keeps growing and we have to weed the garden. So building in subtraction to our work processes is really important. And we're seeing companies do that now, making just as important of getting rid of what's not working so you can have space for what is. Yeah. And that's a new shift for people.
It's so interesting. And I hear you saying a new shift, but if we look at companies, let's say Apple, not new, right? I'm talking to you on my Mac. I have my iPhone next to me. I have my iPad to the left of me. It's one of my favorite places to go. Apple, a long time ago, really simplified simplicity.
That's right.
And the art of subtraction. What can we take out? It's almost everything that they look at. It's the most crowded store when you go to a mall, in my opinion, at least where I live at Somerset in Michigan.
I know Somerset.
You know Somerset, right? You grew up here in Michigan. So how many people and books and examples do people need to see before the light bulb goes off on that it needs to be done? We're in a world where attention spans are less than a goldfish, less than 7 seconds. Yeah. And so how do people break this belief and habit that it has to be complex? There needs to be complexity in it, right? That's like we got to break that down first.
Yeah, a couple things on that, which is, and I love the Apple analogy, right? People want simple. That's why the Apple store is so crowded, right? Is because, they're willing to pay more money if you give them something that makes their lives easier. And if you make the process, part of it too is the checkout process at Apple's just so simple, right?
It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
It's brilliant. So, that's the thing too, is they're willing to pay more money if you respect their time. Right. So you're giving them a benefit in terms of not just the product, but the experience. So
I just want to say one thing. I don't mean to break your flow, but I just want to say one thing on the Apple checkout. Wherever you're standing is where you check out. When I was in commercial real estate, I went from broker to running my office, and I moved our office, and I got everybody's intel, and we moved to this Class A office, blah, blah, blah. And there was an office meeting, and someone raised their hand and because they were complaining about a couple of things. And somebody said, I have to take, I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, I have to take like 10 extra steps to walk from my desk to the fax machine. and that's like a burden. And I was like, but to your point, Apple has like gotten right in there, and they know nobody wants to take an extra step.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I just want to highlight that because it's the burden to walk from here and get through a crowd over there. They take that stress away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about getting rid of complexity is about getting rid of friction.
Yeah.
But you said, when are people going to finally have the light bulb go on? It's, to me, it's less of a light bulb and it's more like a dimmer switch. That's how change really happens, right? Very rarely is it this explosive moment where everyone aligns and goes, we've got to change. It's been building over time. And it's when things just become bright enough. And I'll tell you when it becomes bright enough within a company, it's when it happens to the leadership. So you see all these surveys, right, where people say they're burned out. I mean, Mercer just came out with their global workforce study. So did Gallup. Burnout's at an all-time high. 8 out of 10 people report burnout. We're at our lowest levels of engagement ever. But leaders will view that as whining. But when it starts to change is when it affects the leaders. And leaders now realize everyone's got ADD. They're not innovating as fast as they need to because people don't have time to think. And the leaders are the ones that now are feeling the burnout. So that's why it's starting to change. Unfortunately, that's just human behavior. But then they're left with, well, how do we do it? Right?
Well, let's pause there for a minute. Right?
Yeah.
So that's in my opinion, a very out of touch leadership, right? Because by the time it gets to the top, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so how from your perspective, I see this all the time because I'm talking to leaders about this. How do you zoom out, be an observer, and begin to build a culture where that doesn't take so long to get to the top?
I think a good leader basically breaks down barriers consistently. And one of the techniques that we teach people is to kill stupid rules. And I'll tell you what, we've taught this at the highest levels I do it with the CEO at Pfizer, at Merck, I've done it at Fidelity and at Accenture, and I build this into their cultures. My team teaches this, but I'll use my company as an example because I have to eat my own dog food. If I'm a company about simplicity, I have to make sure that this works. We kill stupid rules on a quarterly basis because rules are like weeds. They grow back. And when my team says they can't get something done or that they're tired and exhausted, I ask why, because I really empower them. And I say, well, what do you need to stop doing? And that always confused people because they're like, what do you mean? What could I stop doing? I said, because those are the excuses people give me. Well, I got this in the way and that in the way. And then I said, well, then why don't you stop doing it? And they're very stunned. So the practice we put in place is called Kill a Stupid Rule. And every quarter when my team gets together, they love it. This is their favorite part of the day.
Yeah.
They tell me, what are the rules, the time sucks, the things that get in our way from being able to do our mission, right? Which is help people reach their potential by teaching them power skills. And they give me dozens of things. Every single quarter we get together, people come up with loads of ideas. And what's interesting about that, Jon, is that they're not rules that they come up with. They're like annoyances, they're habits, they're work norms. And so we literally get rid of practices that aren't working anymore and kill them on the spot. And that's invigorating people. It sends a signal that it's your job to identify and get rid of the stuff. I expect it. And how I know it's working, and this is what people listening should try. I know it's working because every time we get together, it's harder for them to come up with ideas of what to get rid of. So that, to me, that's the metric, right? Yeah. I give them the approach, and now I keep asking them because I'm getting rid of the barriers for them, but I'm also getting rid of the excuses later that they're going to give me. And so it works for everybody.
So, it's so interesting as you're talking about that. I always find, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I work with solopreneurs to Fortune companies. And when I do keynotes, I always start off keynotes the same way. Not start, but within the first couple of minutes, I ask everybody, hey, the only thing I'm going to ask of you when we're together these next, 2 hours, 4 hours is just figure out one thing you can stop doing and one thing you can start doing. Mm-hmm. Just take one thing away. And it resonates at such a deep level because they know that it's going to be, 4 hours goes by quickly, but they think, oh my God, I can't walk away with all of this content. And so when you talk about killing stupid rules, I see a lot of and law of subtraction. I see so many people resist doing this. There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it. It's one of my favorite books by Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. I don't know if you've read it. You would love it if you haven't. But it's the whole book. I've read all of his business books. That book is my favorite. And it talks about that as human beings, we resist what we need to do most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so why do you think people hold on to things? Is it ego? Is it fear of having to retrain? Is it what is it? Why do people resist what we're talking about right now?
The number one thing that creates complexity is fear. So, and it's a very important thing to know, because again, leaders always are focused on getting rid of the friction, but they're not worried about getting rid of the fear. The reason that we kind of create the beast that we become a slave to is because we are taught that more is valuable, right? That's why we get in the cult of busy. I'm so busy, I'm doing all these things, etc. And our fear is when we're told to get rid of something that we'll get rid of the wrong thing, right? We'll look stupid, we'll get fired. And people people always worry too. They're like, well, people say they don't want to go to meetings, but then they're upset when they're not invited, right? And I'll say that's not that it's not FOMO. It's not the fear of missing out. It's the fear of being irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so fear is a very powerful motivator. If we as leaders can take away the fear of getting rid of something, it's not getting rid of isn't a loss. It's focus. Yeah. And if we can start to show that by modeling it ourselves, then people get on board. If we don't do it, they won't do it. And I think that's really the big thing is fear is, you have to have somebody model the behavior before you get other people to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really relevant what you say, what you're talking about, because people are afraid of being irrelevant. And so as leaders, I think it's a big responsibility to make sure that we allow people to have their voice in the room. Yeah. Doesn't mean we're always going to listen. Doesn't mean we're always going to take it, but empowering people to have a voice without fearing that I want to talk the opposite side of what you're talking about, fear, without fearing that they're going to lose their job. There's a big culture, especially when you get into the fortune level and the really corporate companies. I think in all companies, I think it's the biggest fear of people that they're going to lose their job.
That's right.
But there is a lack of empowerment to really speak your mind and be yourself, which there's like $1 million ideas in these people, in all people. So how do you empower people to have a voice so they always feel relevant without like they're going to get fired?
Well, that's where you create that, to your point, the culture that it is not just okay to speak up and challenge work, but it is expected. Yeah. And so like kill a stupid rule is one example. Another one, and this seems counterintuitive, is that you need to not just communicate, but mandate that people stop doing things. So for example, one of the techniques is called stopping it. And in strategic planning, mandating that people don't just present their strategic plans for all the things they're going to do next year, but also within that plan, say all the things they will commit to stopping doing next year.
Yeah.
And that's key, right? I think the other thing is mandating, for example, decision-making. So rather than having the excuse that, oh, I can't make the decision, I don't know, leaders actually need to mandate that people make decisions without them. And that is a very powerful way to force people to get involved, to know that they are expected to challenge work rather than it's just a nice to have. So It seems counterintuitive, but I think that's an important signal that leaders need to send to take away that fear.
And how, from your perspective, can leaders lead that way confidently?
Right? So, it's interesting. So I'm going to use the example of Pfizer, who we've trained their 40 simplicity champions around the world. And the reason that simplicity became such a big thing with Pfizer is that their now CEO, Albert, he was the head of innovation and medicines before that. And his big thing with his teams were they were drowning in meetings. And they couldn't focus and have speed, right? Speed to get drugs to market. So he told them to say no to meetings. What a nice boss, right?
Yeah.
And he realized a month later, everyone was still going to all these damn meetings and he was upset. So he asked his chief of staff, what's going on? I told them to please say no to meetings. And he said, well, the issue is that you still say yes to every meeting. There was such a fear that what he was saying was very different than what he was doing. And so I guess what I'm getting at is the modeling of the behavior has to go along with the mandating of the behavior. Otherwise, the fear takes hold. But these are very simple day-to-day things that we're going to start to change for people so they can get their time back and they can start changing the way we work, right? Because I like to say the way we're working isn't working. So we've got to start to change work.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. That's great. You know, innovation, I know you talk a lot about innovation, and innovation sometimes is not necessarily looking at, you know, AI and what that's going to do to your business. That's a relevant, important piece of it. But sometimes innovation is just re-looking at the simple things in the business and getting more effective, efficient, and tighter at what you are currently doing.
Look at the Apple example you gave. The innovation was doing less, not more. Right. It was creating the space to think so they could come up with something new, not adding more features. In fact, people would argue now that one of the biggest issues that Apple's having is that all they're doing, the iPhone every time it comes out is not new. They're just adding more features and a bigger camera. That's really the joke, right? It's just a bigger camera this time. So there's not a lot of real innovation there because it's, what they were really good at, the art of subtraction, so they could rethink. They've kind of lost that way. But we see a lot of organizations where the innovation came from doing less, not more, right? Getting focused. So Uber, right? They're focused on making it simple to get a cab. Airbnb, easy to get a place to stay. Kickstarter, simple to use other people's money. So the ability to actually focus on the simplicity of something is the innovation. So and I think that, your Apple example is just a prime example of that, but also a prime example of, if you don't keep it up, how you can kind of go off the rails. And that's one of the issues that Apple's facing right now.
I love it. All right, quick speed round.
Okay.
Lisa, book that's had a big impact on you.
Tiny Habits. I love it. I thought it was such a great book because it breaks down parts rather than trying to tackle the big things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that book, and I love Atomic Habits, and best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
I think if you get the work right, you get the culture right. So, and it's a day-to-day thing, but I think we're spending too much time focusing on yoga rooms and not enough on how people spend their time every day.
I agree. All right, last question. Finish the sentence. One thing companies today can do to decrease the fear in their organizations is
modeling the behavior that they want. Because if you don't do it, I won't do it.
Yeah. Tell everybody where they can buy your book, how to connect with you and your ideal client, Lisa.
Well, well, connect with me on LinkedIn, lisabodell.com, or go to my website, futurethink.com. My team would love to help you out. Of course, there's free resources there because we want people to start making this a habit on their own. So reach out and follow us there. And what was your last thing that you said?
Who's your client?
Oh my gosh. Well, so we deal with Fortune 100 clients all around the world, from banking to pharma to national defense. And we're happy to help people big and small. We just happen to deal with some really big ones right now.
I love it. I love it. Lisa, this was a pleasure. I always love talking to people who are making a difference and really in alignment with what I'm trying to accomplish too, which is get people unstuck by thinking big, and you reverse engineer that. It's really about doing the small things every day that make a big impact, and it's great. And I appreciate everything you shared. I just want to extract one thing, which is think community. One thing Lisa talked about, which is so important, is remember that people are scared of becoming irrelevant. So do your best, no matter what role you have, to make people feel relevant. Lisa, this was great. I really enjoyed our talk. I appreciate your time. Always love talking to somebody, of course, from Michigan. And it's great to connect with you. Stay on for just a minute. We'll catch up. Think community. You can reach Lisa at futurethink.com, is it? And you can reach me if you want to talk about any coaching at jondwoskin.com. Thanks, everybody. Lisa, thanks a ton.